Hello and welcome to everyone to another episode of Gupshup with Gill. So far, we have had people who write on the sport, who cover the story, who analyze the game. But today we have someone who is responsible in some way for bringing the game that we love so much to us in different ways. I have with me Hemant Buch sir, who's been in the field of TV direction and producing for the last 20-25 years. He's one of the people who are responsible for bringing us all those visuals from a stadium to our TVs and enhancing our viewing experience better. Welcome to the show, Hemant sir. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for taking out this time.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Now, sir, obviously, I'll start by asking you about your journey because, like I mentioned before, yours is a field where people really don't know much about how they have to begin and then take their careers forward. Well, when we are talking about sports persons, we have enough accounts. So why don't you tell us about your journey so far of uh, the 20-25-year-old career, how you started, and then where you've reached now, the point where you are.
So yeah, I mean, the journey started much before when I started playing sport. I was a pretty decent sports person in my time. I played, two sports, badminton and table tennis, and I played them to a pretty good level. I played nationals in both. I won the All India University in both. So those are good sports to be part of, good grounding and stuff like that. But after playing sport until a certain level, then there is a plateau. You don't really get to go much further unless you want to work in a sports quota job and do that kind of stuff, which was not my cup of tea. So I needed to keep connected to sport, but I knew that I wouldn't be something like a national champion or something. I would be a middle ranking sort of maybe 15, 20 ranked player in India in either of the sports I chose. And that was not something that would serve me with anything very, very good or something, that was not where I wanted to be in life. So I decided that I need to do something which is where I could make a difference. And I thought sports journalism would be a good option. I looked around and eventually I was asked to join a newspaper named The Pioneer in Delhi, where Mr. V. Krishnaswamy was the sports editor and G. Rajaraman was the deputy sports editor. So it was a great place to start working, learn about sport, and get a good grounding. Got there were lots of pages. There were 3 pages of sport, so there was lots to write, and they always gave you the freedom to write and express yourself. So it was good to get the basics of sport right there, and worked there for a year and a half. And obviously, the pay in newspapers wasn't that great as you might know or remember from that time, if you know of people. But I decided that television was probably the way to go. And luckily, as soon as I was thinking that, I got an offer. I got a couple of offers, and I joined a news channel called BITV, Business India Television. I had also got an offer from NDTV, but I decided to join BITV. It didn't last very long, but again, as luck would have it, BITV was on the first and second floors, and on the third floor there was an organization called TWI, Trans World International, IMG. They were doing all the cricket in India. So at the time that BITV was shutting down, they were looking for people to join them, and it was an easy transition from the first floor to the third floor, and so I joined them. And uh, and yeah, I mean, that was where the journey started. Then I started working on India cricket, and yeah, and as after a point of time, IMG was struggling. It was good 6 year run there, but after that point, it was struggling. And at that time, I got an offer from Dubai, from Ten Sports, that was setting up there, and I joined them, and I stayed with them for a while, uh, a good 15 years. And yeah, and then when Ten Sports got sold to Z, and then from Z to Sony, I decided to make my own way and do what I enjoyed instead of sitting in office and pushing paper. I decided to branch out and work on actual sport, get my hands dirty, have some fun, and that's where we are. That's what I'm doing these days, traveling the world, watching cricket, and bringing it to you guys.
Well, it's a great story to hear and know about it. But you say it, you say it in a way that it's the most fun job, like you're just traveling the world and watching cricket. But I'm sure it comes with a lot of its own challenges. Like the first challenge would be, how do you set up all the cameras and everything in a stadium? So just take us through a little bit through that process of setting up those cameras, and then those cameras taking the footage and then reeling it to a control room, and then it coming on to the television. Just tell us a little bit in brief how it can be done, so that I know explaining the whole process is going to be difficult in such a short time, but something that just makes us think about how difficult the job of a cameraman can be, while covering the sport.
So I won't be able to give you the entire process because it will take a long time. But if a series is starting, if a match is starting, the crew is there 3 or 4 days in advance. They first set up the control room with where engineering sets up. If you look at the cables, there would be thousands of miles of cables that run, and it is amazing the way these guys do it. I don't have to rig. I am a director. I just walk in and sit down and direct. But there is so much. I just cannot imagine how these guys in a couple of days get everything right. So many cables going into the right places, everything working. You run these cables. There are camera cables, there are audio cables, there are cables for graphics, there are cables for Hawkeye, there are cables for Spider Cam. There's so much stuff going on that it is unbelievable, and people work so hard to set this up. I mean, it's we think about players, we think about other things. I mean, but broadcast crew, they do a fantastic job. I mean, they are absolutely the unsung heroes. They don't get paid enough, in my humble opinion. They are taken for granted, again, in my humble opinion, but they do a fabulous job. So it starts with that, the control room, and there are engineers who set everything up. There are cables that are given to the cameraman. Cameramen take these cameras in boxes and set them up from scratch. It's like an example would be like a broken down gun. So it's in many separate pieces, right? And then you assemble it. That's what they do in the army. This is what these guys do. And these cameras are massive, heavy cameras. The lenses are heavy. Each thing goes in the right place. Each cameraman sets up his controls. There is a focus and there is a zoom. They set it up the way they want. Somebody wants it on the left. Somebody wants it on the right. The viewfinders are separate. They set them up the way they wanted. The height is as per the way each cameraman is, because each cameraman is of a different height, different size, everything like that. And each camera has its own specialized importance. Some cameras are on wheels, some cameras are not, some cameras are on platforms. Each camera has a different function. There are also in the control room, there are the replay machines known as EVS, which is a company from Belgium, which basically does most of the sports broadcast replay equipment. They've got that is set up. There is an audio desk which is set up. There's Hawkeye, there is Spider Cam. They have their own controls. They have their own places. They have to set up all their cables on top as well. Because it's a fly-through camera. So they do their own rig, which is extremely tough as well. And it's a camera which is pretty important. It flies through, so you can't afford any dramas with it. If it falls on somebody's head, then there is a problem. So everything is tested and prepared. It's a longish process. There's a commentator's room, the commentary box, which is set up. Cables are run up to that as well. There is a desk set up for us, the director and the vision mixer, and then there is a whole bank of monitors in front of us, where I can see, these days there are about up to 35 cameras. So I get the output of 35 cameras plus 8 or 10 replay outputs plus graphics output, the Hawkeye output. There's a virtual, these days there's virtual advertising. I get that output. I get the off-air monitor. It's a sea of monitors. I mean, I look at about 80, 90 sort of outputs at the same time. And then I have to curate it for you real time. So I see the ball going somewhere, so I cut that camera to line. So each thing is real time. I call out, and a vision mixer sitting next to me cuts it, and we decide each replay. So there is an EVS coordinator who sort of makes a pattern of the replays, and you got to get out just you got to time it just right to get out in time for the next ball to happen. So everything is timed just right. So yeah, it is like a machine. So it's yeah. Well, I can say that I watch cricket for a living. Yeah, it goes a lot beyond that. There's so much stress because in live television, lots of things go wrong. Sometimes there's no audio. Sometimes you can't hear something. You got to make things up on the fly. Nothing ever goes right all the time. And how you deal with adversity, how you deal with pressure is what what makes you as a broadcaster. So pressure is there all the time. There are no retakes in life. It's not like a movie where or take two, take three, take four. There are no takes. You look at it and say, oh, what the hell? What happened there? He missed it. That's something that we aim to avoid, and it is extremely tough, but I enjoy it.
You mentioned quite a lot there, and the one thing that has struck with me is how you sort of look at 80, 90 cameras and then make a decision. So it speaks a lot about the reaction time and the powers of concentration that might be required. So there's something I always wanted to know, that we talk of players and batsmen requiring, especially batsmen requiring a lot of concentration to play out a day of test match. But what we sometimes don't account for is batsmen, if they get out, they can have the day to themselves. They can sit in the dressing room, relax. The bowlers are always not on the field. But for a cameraman, they have to cover each and every delivery and be focused. So how do the different cameramen who are there on the field and the people who work in this field, how do they train themselves for these immense powers of concentration? Because like you just mentioned, you miss one ball, or you miss following the ball itself, or go to a wrong direction or a wrong camera, people are going to be out there with the sword saying, what is this happening? They can't even provide better coverage, etc., etc. So how is this process of working on these immense powers of concentration?
So which is why I say, I mean, these broadcasters are worth their weight in gold. They do a job. You only notice them when there is a mistake, and if you don't notice them at all, it means that the coverage was flawless, right? So that's where it is. How they train themselves is I mean, there is a lot of muscle memory involved. Spin vision is one of the toughest cameras where you try and follow the ball extremely tight. And if you look at the camera, if you look at that camera, I mean, each camera platform is at a different height, so there's a different sort of movement involved. The tighter you go, the more difficult it is to maintain focus, especially at night, where the depth of field sort of is very shallow. In the daytime, it is a slightly better option, but depth of field is very shallow at night, and the focus, to maintain focus, to get the release, the pitch of the ball, and then the impact of the ball all at one go is mind-boggling, and that takes immense powers of concentration. Do it for an entire day, and then to come back and do it again the next day, and again the next day, and again the next day is unbelievable. And it's the same with the cameras that you mentioned. This is the wicket to wicket camera and the ball follow camera, which are invariably there on every ball. So if those cameras mess up, then you're in a lot of trouble. I mean, because people see that and decide that the coverage is good or not good. Some of the other cameras, if they do not manage to follow the ball, or do not manage to follow the batsman, or do not get that reaction, we do not have to play the replay, or I do not have to cut that camera to line. But these cameras will always get cut to line. And if they mess up, then you will always see that. So again, there is different kinds of pressure on different cameras, different cameramen. There's a mid-wicket cameraman, which I think is the toughest camera to do as well, in a different way, because if you look at the ball traveling sideways and the batsman sort of going out with the swing of the bat, and you don't know, because you don't know whether it's hit the edge or not. It can go to third man, it can go to fine leg, it can go to long on, long off, anywhere. But this guy has to go with the ball every time, and he uses. I mean, he would be listening to the sound, and they train themselves to do that. So what they hear the sound, and it helps them decide. It's like a batsman when he sees a fast bowler, he reacts, right? So they've got a reaction to that, and and sort of, because they are so highly fine-tuned and highly trained, they can just go with the ball wherever it goes. It's not 100% of the time, but I would ask all your viewers and to be a little bit more forgiving now that it's not easy. Mistakes do happen. Everybody makes mistakes, and it is live. You can't go back. And sometimes when somebody's having a bad day, there is always that spiral effect where you lose confidence in yourself. So as a director, my job is to give them confidence. Sometimes I might make a mistake. I might cut a few things wrong, and my confidence might get shattered. But there's nobody to pick me up, so I have to pick myself up. So if I make a mistake, I have to put it out of my mind. I think crisis management is, along with knowledge of the game and ability to see the monitor stack and call the right cameras, this ability to deal with pressure, I think, is the most important part of broadcasting.
Basically, the process is pretty much the same for cricketers and the people who cover the game alike, is that you have to forget what has happened on the previous ball and then concentrate on the ball which is going to come at you. Just that the pressure and the stakes are much higher for the people who are covering the game. So you make an excellent point, and you've given viewers a lot of information. And like you mentioned about the mid-wicket camera, I was just thinking about it, that whenever I've been in a stadium and you are at the east stand or the west stand, where you have to look at the pitch from from not from a point of view, but from a whole direct point of view. Sometimes you as a viewer also can't figure out where the ball has gone, and but so I think that gives a lot of perspective. Now this brings me to something else where you said you have to do mixing. Now another challenge that comes with a game like cricket is that all venues are not same, because the dimensions of the field are not the same. The rules are like that. Only the dimensions of pitch are fixed. So I've seen a lot of times this happen at Kotla, and I think it happens at Jaipur as well, that sometimes when the ball is hit towards the long on or long off, there's an obstruction from the top just because of the way stadium is built. And sometimes you just lose the ball, with the relay.
Going towards the side screen.
Yeah.
Towards the side screen, you don't see it. It's the same in Sharjah.
Yeah.
So what you need to do there is you need to cut another camera, because obviously if the ball is hit straight, you cannot see it from the ball follow camera. So at a certain point, you have to cut to the mid-wicket camera or the opposite side follow camera, or the slips or reverse slip camera, whichever side the ball is going towards. So then you have to decide in real time that, okay, now the ball might go out of frame, so you need to cut this camera, and this camera has the ball in frame. It may not have the ball in frame, because again, as I told you, mid-wicket is a tough camera to do. And sometimes it's a blind cut, and you might see that he doesn't have the ball in frame. But generally, the aim is to look at all the other cameras at the same time the ball has been hit, decide that it might go out of frame, and then cut to it before it goes out of frame. So it doesn't always happen. It's very, very tough, and yeah, that is a problem. I mean, it should never be the case. When you build a stadium, you should have the foresight to build it in a manner that there is no obstruction for this. But nobody thinks about broadcasting when they make stadiums, and side screens these days have got a lot bigger. I would suggest that people who are making stadiums think about broadcast first, because it needs to be a broadcast friendly stadium to showcase your game in the best possible light.
Okay, now coming to cameras and specific cameras, is there an unsaid rule about having a coolie cam on production, especially when India is fielding? Because we see this so many times, and I've seen especially seen this on Twitter, that people sort of sometimes complain that when India are fielding, there's too much focus on Virat Kohli. Even when the bowler takes a wicket, the focus is on Virat. So is there an unsaid rule about having a Kohli cam, or it's just that it just so happens that as producers and directors, you do sort to look after the captain and the coach, and it just so happens that because Virat is so expressive that the camera straight away points to him.
So it depends upon the director. They decide the storyline. It's up to them. But if you're talking about complaints, people complain about everything. If you show somebody in the crowd, they complain that they're showing somebody in the crowd. If you don't show anybody in the crowd, they complain that they're not showing somebody in the crowd. So I don't take, if even if you look at commentators, some people, you won't find a consensus on anybody being a good commentator. Everybody has their own likes and dislikes, and that's fine. I mean, that's how the world works. What do you look for when you're looking for reactions? You look at somebody who reacts the most. So your camera obviously goes there. Who's the captain? You obviously look at the captain to see his reactions. So Kohli is both the most reactive and the captain. So it so happens that you generally have a camera on the captain. If it was Rahane, for example, it may not be the best thing in the world to focus the camera on Rahane, because the camera won't pick up much. He will be very stoic, whether in defeat or victory, and the whole purpose will be lost, and you'll go to somebody else. But that's what it is. You don't want deadpan expressions. I mean, okay, deadpan expressions also tell a story, but each time there is a wicket, if there's a deadpan expression, what is the story? That this man does not react, but that's only one bit of the story. So this is how it is. People will complain. That's I would say that's their job. If I were to go into their work and complain about everything that they do, then I could find lots of stuff as well. But I would suggest that people understand why Kohli is shown. I do not do as much India cricket as most people, but I understand why Kohli is shown. He is the most expressive. He is the captain. I would then say that you still need to balance it out. You cannot take the easy shot all the time and go to Kohli every single time. It can't be a pattern. I would change it around. I would have a crowd shot if there is crowd. These days there isn't, but I would not necessarily go to Kohli each time personally. But I do not see any reason for complaining. When you start directing, then you can do it the way you want. But at this point in time, let the guy curate what he does.
Now you spoke of the crowds being there and taking a shot of the crowds as well. Now there are also some stadiums in the game of cricket which are extremely picturesque. One is say Cape Town, where you can always see the Table Mountains. Then there's Dharamshala. Gaul is another stadium there which is very beautiful. So sometimes does having a beautiful or a picturesque stadium help in terms of telling a story on the broadcast, or it's not much to do and you only use it to when there's an empty space or there's nothing happening on the field? So how does a director decide when to take shots of, say, the beauty around the stadium?
You are asking perhaps the wrong person, because I always go for beauty shots. I have made a habit of exploiting my drone to the hilt. I don't know whether you watched England versus or Sri Lanka versus England recently. I sort of, the beauty of Gaul is absolutely stunning. So I perhaps overindulged in it, but I thought it was fantastic. Nobody had seen Gaul from that angle. It was a test match, and yeah, I mean, yes, there were lots of boats. Yes, there were lots of shots of the lighthouse. Yes, there were lots of shots of the Gaul fort. But it was just mind blowing. You could see the weather coming in, and I am a photographer myself, so I love visual spectacles, and for me, this is just another part of a visual spectacle. You don't need to hammer sport into everyone. Why not show people the surrounds? I have absolutely no problem with that. Even the last series that I did, which was Sri Lanka versus Bangladesh in Kandy, we had some marvelous drone shots. It's among the mountains. The river is close by, and yeah, it is situated in a very green area. And again, you can see with the mountains, the weather coming in, maybe some magical sunsets with God's light peeping through the clouds. So we did all of that, and I have absolutely no issues with that. I probably more self-indulgent or indulgent in that manner, because I personally love picturesque surroundings, and I, as long as it doesn't take away from the game, why not show it to people? I mean, some people will love it, some people will say, oh, what is he showing? But again, it's like everybody else, jitne log utni salah.
In fact, I did watch that series, and the part that I personally loved the most and what I thought was quite different was when Bumble was in the golf court and he was, looking at those stones and explaining it how the pitch is going to be. I personally enjoyed it, but yes, what you're saying about people, some people liking it and
that
not.
series that series wasn't the one that you're talking about. I was talking about the most recent series. Bumble wasn't there in the most recent series, but this was the last series, which was earlier this year. So Bumble wasn't part of that. Bumble was back in England. He wasn't allowed to travel. So we didn't have the drone in the series that you're talking about. We had it in this one, which was held earlier this year.
Okay. But I don't know whose idea was it, but I actually loved the fact where how he was, describing the pitch and, going through the golf court and just describing how the pitch could be. So, but like you said, there are some people who are going to enjoy it and some people who are not going to enjoy it, which is something which Mazhar Arshad also said about commentary, that he said that sometimes I will put in some stats and then people will label me that I am a pro this player and anti this player. So he says that that is something that you have to accept it, in today's world, because there is so much of access to social media with everyone.
Tell Mazhar Arshad that he has an agenda. Just tell him I said so. Yeah, so just tell him that, yeah, he always has an agenda.
I
I'm
actually,
joking. I'm joking. I always have a little bit of fun with him. He's very good. Again, as far as stats are concerned as well, since you brought up stats, it's very important to utilize stats in the correct manner. And again, some directors and some producers can do that. Not everybody, takes the stat and sort of gets the best out of it. So it's pretty important. You need a sense of the game to be able to do that. You also need commentators who can bring the essence of the graphic, of the story of the graphic to life, which is what I always ask somebody who's providing the stat: tell me the story, and then I will get the commentators to talk about the story. Don't just show me the graphic, because by the time you've figured out the story of the graphic is gone. So before I put up the graphic, I tell the commentators, okay, this is a graphic and this is a story in it. Have a look. So then they can explain it in their own way and bring it to you guys.
now, since you mentioned commentators, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of commentators, and you would have also come across a few of those commentators who would have done their research themselves and would know, probably, the history, the current players. Someone they would probably even know about a player who's just making his debut. So, who, in your opinion, or you don't need to take one particular name, but who are those in the field of commentary or even broadcasting that you would say they are just the perfect people and know probably everything about what they have to do and probably a little extra as well?
I mean, most commentators work pretty hard in their game, because it's their profession. I I worked more with some and less with others, so I will obviously have a slightly different perspective from somebody else. It depends on a lot of commentators that you work with. But yeah, personally, in my experience, I mean, I have the highest regard for people like Ian Chappell, Ian Bishop, um, we Nasser Hussain, Mike Atherton. They're both fantastic. I like Bumble as well. He's brilliant. Simon Dool is excellent. We have Danny Morrison for the white ball format. He's brilliant when he puts his mind to it. He's great for the red ball format as well. I mean, he's got great knowledge of the game. And we among the Indians, I mean, we've got I think Harsha Bhogle plays his role beautifully, and I personally like Sanjay Manjrekar as well. We've got from the West Indies, my personal favorite is Fazir Mohammed. He's an excellent commentator, underrated, but his knowledge of cricket, especially West Indies cricket, is second to none. He is they call him the next Tony Cozier, and I would say in a comparison with Tony Cozier, he does not really come off second best. He's as good as Tony was, and Tony himself was brilliant as well.
You mentioned three people now, which was Harsha Bhogle, Fazir Mohammed, Tony Cozier. Now, these these are the people who come from a non-player background. Do you think that there is a space where more people who are not probably from from the playing background should be coming into broadcasting and sharing their own views and everything? Because now what we have seen of late is that there are not so many people who are from the non-playing background coming to the fore. Uh, do you think there's still a space for that?
Definitely, I think a commentary team needs to be made up of different kinds of people. We don't need, 6 or 7 of the same kind of commentators. Even if they're as good as say Nasir Hussain, I don't need 7 Nasir Hussains. I would rather have one Nasir Hussain, one Bumble, one Ian Bishop, one Ian Chappell, one Fazir Mohammed. I mean, it's or one Harsha Bhogle. I wouldn't want 7 Fazir Mohammeds as well, for example. I mean, I would want a sprinkling. Each one has a different take on things, and I would like to have a commentary team that does not always agree with each other, and they debate their points. They have interesting points to make, so that you get a different perspective. You don't want, as a viewer, you're looking for perspective, you're looking for knowledge, you're looking for information. And if there are different kinds of commentators who think differently, I forgot to mention Ian Smith. I haven't worked with him a lot, but I think he's fabulous as well. The sense of humor he brings in, him and Bumble. I mean, that's just brilliant. I mean, that's what is that's what defines them, and that's what you want in a commentary team. One person who can bring you the lighter side of sport. They're not, again, they don't come out second best to anyone as commentators, but they have a different take on things. Jeffrey Boycott, when he was commentating, was superb as well. So you have all of these people. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. I mean, there are some really really good commentators who I may have missed out because I may have forgotten about them at this point in time. But these right now, these are the ones that come to mind. I mean, there are some commentators who are presenters as well, and those guys are excellent as well. JP Dumini, for example, is excellent from the new crop. Mike Hazeman is very good. Pommy Bangwa is very good. Uh, I mean, there is a plethora of excellent commentators in the world of cricket. But the important thing is to get the balance right. If you got the choice to get the balance right, you got Mel Jones. I would never. I mean, Mel Jones is one of the most fabulous commentators in the world of cricket, and uh, I think she should be, used a lot more. Um, I I've worked with her, and I have been so thoroughly impressed with her that I wouldn't have believed it before I started. But she's brilliant.
Well, too many names. That actually tells us that there's a lot to learn about commentary than what we believe, and there are a lot of good options as well, despite the the unsatisfaction which we actually come across sometimes on social media. Now, another thing that I want to discuss with you is the various technologies that have come up in terms of helping the umpires make the decision. There is obviously ball tracking, there's obviously hotspot, and there's obviously sneakometer. Now, what I want to know from you is that how much, what is the different equipment that comes along with these technologies, and how are these related to a third umpire or the decision makers to use it?
So there are different ways of ball tracking. There are two different companies involved. In Australia, mm, you have Virtual Eye. In New Zealand also, I think it's Virtual Eye, and the rest of the world it's Hawkeye. So they both track differently. Hawkeye has 6 dedicated high-speed cameras. Virtual Eye uses broadcast cameras, so there is obviously a big difference there in the way that they track. And it's the same with real-time SNCO or whatever you call it. There are two different names for it for the two different companies. So Ultra Edge and real-time SNCO. So whatever it is, I mean, there are different ways. Again, they are linked to these 6 cameras for Hawkeye, which is Ultra Edge, and for real-time SNCO, they're using broadcast cameras. So the problem with using broadcast cameras, to my mind, is that sometimes, as we talked about, the cameraman missed the ball, missed the impact of the ball, and then your tracking gets stuck sometimes. With these fixed high motion cameras, that problem is avoided. Eventually, though, the weakest link is the human bit, and there is a human element involved, and because there is a paucity of time, you've got to do everything quickly. They've got to track the ball quickly. They've got to look at the algorithm. They've got to navigate point of impact. The point of pitching. All that has to be looked at manually. The point of impact is definitely where it hit is to be decided, by the operator along with the technology at his disposal. So if there's a difference of a couple of frames as well, everything changes. So that's where human error could come in. But having said that, it is a lot better than relying on the human eye. Again, it is tracking, so we do not know exactly what would have happened. But again, we see that it usually doesn't look as bad as it could when just seen with the naked eye, and the umpires get caught out. It's a good safety net for the umpires, and I think it's a pretty good thing, these technologies.
So these 6 cameras which are there for ball tracking, they're not manually operated. They're there and they operate themselves, right?
Yes, they do not operate themselves. They're fixed cameras, and they operate at about 300 frames a second. 4 are square on and 2 are front on. So they cover both ends of the wicket. So which is why they're also used in stumpings and runouts. So they are very, very important cameras.
Now, one thing that you mentioned in this was that you mentioned how the projection is after how it is a projection, so it cannot be 100% accurate, which is something that I completely understand when it comes to.
I'm not saying it cannot be 100% accurate, but I mean, how do you prove it is 100% accurate or 100% inaccurate? Because it hasn't happened. It will never happen. So it will remain a projection. It is what you think will happen, and it's plotted. Mm-hmm. So you don't know whether it is right or wrong. But I mean, if you're happy with the technology, I think you should take it.
No, so what I was getting to was that I understand why there's an umpire's call because of this very reason, but what I don't understand is why there's an umpire's call for impact, because impact is something that we can measure through the cameras, right? That shouldn't be a projection. So why does that happen, or do you think it can be changed, or it should be the way it is?
I definitely don't think it should be the way it is. I agree with you. Impact should not be umpire's call, and this I've been saying for many years. Earlier, pitching also used to be umpire's call, which thankfully has gone away. So if something has happened and you're saying that there is a margin for error there as well, then I don't understand it. I mean, there may be a margin for error involved, and I am not a scientific person. People have explained to me why there should be, but I would say just take it. That I mean, it's something that I don't understand. It complicates things. I can understand with the projection why you can say there is a margin for error built in, but here, I mean, there is absolutely no reason for it. I would say if it looks, I mean, if it says it's hit in line, it's hit in line. If it says it hasn't hit in line, it hasn't hit in line. I mean, you decide 100% of the ball needs to be hitting in line, or 95% or 87% or whatever it is. Just take one percentage and go with it. I mean, I don't see any reason why you need to have umpires call for impact.
It makes sense. Another thing, in terms of decision making, which causes a lot of debate, is the soft signal. And I remember you'd written an article on this when Virat Kohli was given out in Perth in 2018, that why the soft signal needs to exist, and we'd given an explanation about the cameras and how that doesn't work. Uh, can you give that explanation again for why the soft signal exists? Talking in the sense of why it is because of the cameras, because I actually couldn't understand the cameras part of it, and I'm sure that confusion exists with a lot of people, that why should there be a soft signal. So can you please?
The confusion will exist anyway, because I mean, I see cricketers who have done millions of games of cricket or commentating, they don't seem to understand it. And I think that's a great shame and a great pity, that if they are not able to explain it, then they're doing everybody a disservice. They should be able to explain this. Not every game of cricket is covered with 40 cameras or 35 cameras like the IPL or India cricket or England cricket is. What happens when cricket is played between Bangladesh and Sri Lanka? You have 10 cameras, 12 cameras, 14 cameras, right? If say Afghanistan are playing, there are even fewer. Zimbabwe are playing, there are even fewer. So are you saying that every tournament has an equal number, or every event has an equal number of cameras? No. So if you see, with cameras, there is also the question of speed, right? There are some cameras, normal cameras are 24, 25 frames a second. Some cameras are 100 frames, some cameras are 300 frames, some cameras are 1,000 frames a second. The higher the frame rate, the more you will see what has happened to the ball. There is less of a chance of missing frames. With normal motion cameras, you will always miss frames, especially side on, where the ball travels a lot further, because it's moving sideways, and there is a lot more movement involved. If it's front on, the movement is less. So the problem with that is that most of the times you will not be able to tell, right? And if there is no soft signal, see, the human nature here is such that if I were to give you an option, right, as an umpire, to go up to check whether the ball has bounced or not, you will always go up, because these same commentators will slaughter the umpire if he makes the wrong decision. So he will go up for it, even if, I mean, you see it for runouts, right? Even if somebody is 3 feet in or 6 feet out, they still call for a replay and for the third umpire to step in. So then what happens? Each time this goes up and there is no soft signal, the batsman will be not out. And if the batsman is not out every time, and you see it more or less clearly out, but since the umpire has not called it and there is some sort of a doubt, the batsman is not given out, then you will criticize that this is what happened earlier. There was no soft signal earlier, and commentators conveniently forget that. And I've done so many games where, because there was no soft signal, batsmen were given not out, even though they were almost clearly out. And yeah, I mean, the soft signal came in for a reason, right? Now I see cricketers who should know better saying that, only within the 30-yard circle should there be a soft signal. So there is no 30-yard signal, 30-yard circle in Test cricket. So what happens there? How do you calculate 30 yards? I mean, 30-yard circle does not mean the third umpire, the square leg umpire is standing in a certain position. It may be less than 30 yards away from him, even if it's outside the 30-yard circle. So I don't understand what the outrage is about. You're trying to get the right decision, and the soft signal is such that if there were no cameras, what would the decision be? Right? We do a lot of matches in club cricket where there are no cameras. What happens there? The umpire gives it out or not out, right? So on the one hand, you say that you should just take the umpire's decision. Umpire is deciding. He's saying that, yeah, okay, if there were no cameras, I'm giving that out, right? And then you look at, and then he tells the third umpire, look at the evidence and tell me whether I am completely wrong. And then sometimes he's completely wrong, sometimes he's not. Sometimes it is confusing. I agree. But don't look at it from the prism of having 40 cameras each time. Each series is not like Australia, India, where you got so many cameras, or like India, England, or like the IPL. Think, Afghanistan, Zimbabwe. Think Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. If you're going to have one rule, or you want to have different rules for different matches. That if Zimbabwe are playing, there is a different rule. If India are playing, there's a different rule. Then okay, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, then maybe you can think about it. But again, I mean, yeah, the IPL this time decided not to have a soft signal. But again, that was the IPL. It had a lot of cameras in place. So look at it from the prism of all of Test cricket, not just your team playing, and your team is India. And India, when it plays in India, has a lot of cameras. When they're going to play in Zimbabwe, they won't have so many cameras, right? So you will need things like this. So this is the prism where you got to look at. And yes, there are lots of arguments and counter arguments. There are some pros, there are some cons. I'm not saying it is the perfect solution. It isn't. If there's a better solution, go for it. But we already had a phase where there was no soft signal and it did not work, which was why the soft signal came into existence.
You make a very good argument, and makes a lot of sense that it's essentially being brought in to bring a sense of parity in the sport. Because if there would be no soft signal, then it would be very hard for batsmen to be given out in terms of close catches or catches which are close to the ground, and then you will have the same people.
There is also the sense of foreshortening with cameras. There is a problem of foreshortening because it is a 2D image, and the image flattens out. So if you look at it from the top, you will always think that the ball has bounced. And if you look at it from a low angle, because the ground curves away, you will never see when the ball goes into the fielder's hands. So again, it's a little bit of an issue. You don't always have the clearest picture, and every cameraman will not always be able to follow the ball all the time. Sometimes cameramen miss it. When there are only 10 cameras, there are only 2 cameras following the ball, and one may have the fielder covering it from the one end, the other guy might miss it. Then what happens if you don't get the ball at all, right? If you go for the soft signal and the ball is not in frame, what happens? The batsman is not out. Even if it has clearly gone into his hands, everybody can see it, but the umpire has gone up because or if the umpire, like in the NBA, again, this is just an example where he goes to the side and looks at the replay and then decides, okay, he doesn't give any signal to anybody. Then we go into the realm of technology, which is of course there, where you wear glasses. The umpires can wear their glasses and review the decision on those glasses and say, okay, this was out or not out. In which case, they can go with their gut and they can say, okay, this confirms what I believe or not. And then you don't have to go for the soft signal. I mean, there are lots of different ways of doing it. But I'm just talking about soft signal versus no soft signal, why it came about and what the problems are. Right. So I mean, there will be, as technology evolves, as new solutions are found, there will be. I mean, that article was 3 years back. I mean, that is dated. It needs updation. But the point at issue here is, why was the soft signal there? Why it isn't really as wrong as people make it out to be.
So what I was saying, that if it goes out of the window, then you will have too many these calls going into the batsman favor, and then you will say that the game is not fair on the bowlers. So it again brings us back to the point you made earlier, that everyone's never going to be happy, and there are going to be issues.
These same commentators will then criticize the umpire for doing this. It's the easiest job in the world, being a commentator, because you can say what you want, and you can, if you say something, you can always change it. You can always attack the umpire. We saw Shane Warne attacking an umpire in Australia, Bruce Oxenford. He just went after him. It was absolutely unfair, uncalled for, in my opinion. Bruce Oxenford is a fine umpire, and again, even if he made mistakes, everybody makes mistakes. Each one of the best umpires in the world has made a lot of mistakes in their time. But as one umpire, Murray Erasmus, once told me, every decision that I make is right as far as I can see it at that point in time. I might go back and say that, okay, I made a mistake. But when I see it, I do not deliberately go out to make a wrong decision. To my eye, the decision is right at that time. Other evidence might come which might show that my decision was wrong. I will take it on the chin. But I don't go out and say that, okay, I'm going to make a wrong decision. It can happen.
Now, in such a long career that you had, there would obviously been days where you would have thought that, okay, today was the best day that I've had at at my work, and today this is the day that I just want to forget. The team has not been able to do a good job. I haven't been able to do a good job. So, I want you to talk about those days where you felt that you've done the best possible broadcasting that was possible, and one of those days where you felt that nothing really worked and you weren't really happy with it. Any of these 2 days?
To be honest, it doesn't quite work that way. To me, every time I set out to work, I again go out to do my best, and to my mind, it is the best it possibly could have been on that day. Of course, when it's the perfect day, I know it comes about once in 15, 20, 25 days, and then you know that everything has clicked, nothing has gone wrong. Not my fault, the entire team, because there's so many cogs involved. If I made a mistake, I know. But there has actually never been a time where I have sort of felt that there have been some terrible broadcasting days because the crew hasn't been great, or there has been some times where things have gone wrong, communications have gone wrong. There are things that have happened, but you generally take it in your stride. It's not as if each of these is sort of a learning experience, and things, in broadcasting, there is never really a perfect day. Something invariably goes wrong, but only you will know it. Nobody else in the world might know it, but okay, I could have called that camera instead of this camera. I missed that reaction. You will not know it sitting at home because you don't see all those cameras, but I will know, okay, this might have been a better option. I can always go back and show it on the replay, but if you are a hard taskmaster, which I am on myself, I will always say, okay, I should have cut that camera instead of that camera, and then that camera instead of that camera. But that's just what I think to myself. It's not something that would really come to the fore or impact something. I try and minimize things like freezes going on air. I try and minimize whip pans or anything that goes on air. All of these things which are technically wrong, that should not happen. I try and ensure that I do not cut cameras too slow or too fast, because I think each shot needs to register. But again, it shouldn't be so lazy that you dwell on one shot for too long. So it's a fine mix. It just comes about with experience, and there is a feel. You feel, okay, today was right. Today it could have been a little bit better. It's I mean, there is no real particular. There are days where things have gone wrong technically, and we have fought them and done the best that we could. But again, those would take too long to recount, and it may be too technical to sort of go into. But overall, each day has been fun, and I can honestly say that each day I've given as much as I could.
Now, what can we look at the next thing in terms of cricket production and broadcasting? Any new technology or any new sort of camera that might come into play? Because we've seen a couple of things that have come in a few leagues. I think it was in the BBL that there's a camera in the helmet of the batsman. There's a camera placed at the cap of the umpire. So any other such invention or invention that might come in cricket broadcasting in the future, or in the near future? Obviously, in in 5 to 10 years time, there will obviously be something, but anything that we can look at in the very near future that might enhance the viewer experience.
I mean, if you've seen now, interviews are done via the spider cam, for example. It has got a mic on its inside and a speaker as well. So, in these days of the pandemic, it's perfect because you don't have to sort of step in. That there has to be no direct interaction between the player and a commentator or a cameraman or anything like that. So it's a socially distanced sort of interview that works really well. We've got this buggy camera is magnificent these days, and even that now has a mic and a speaker. So and it can hydraulically go up and down, so it gives you different angles. So these innovations will keep coming. Eventually, what you need to see is that these cameras, the main cameras that are there, which are the basis of broadcasting, those are the ones that will be your cake. Everything else is the icing. So innovation is good, but a lots of times we innovate for the sake of innovating because you got, as your KRA, you need to get into innovations a year or whatever it is. That's why you innovate. Most of them fall by the wayside. These innovations, they come in and they go away because they don't really work. What I see that might make a difference is something like higher speed cameras that instead of 25 frames a second, we might then end up covering a match with cameras, normal cameras also being 100 frames a second or 200 frames a second, and more ultra motion cameras. So that is difficult because it means there is less time. Each replay takes up more time. To match sound, the audio with a 500 or 1,000 frame per second camera is very, very difficult. It's impossible at this point in time, which is why you might see that in ultra motion cameras replays there is no audio, because the audio also gets stretched, and to match it also takes a lot of effort. So it doesn't happen. We might see in the future that we might be able to match these up as well. There are lots of different innovations that can come about. Lenses might get even better, and they are at every single point in time. They're getting sharper and sharper, and they're getting wider and wider aperture lenses. So they're better in the dark. You're getting 4K, you're getting 8K, you'll get 16K, you'll get whatever. So that will happen. The innovation that is happening now is to be covering games. The crew might not have to travel to the ground, other than the cameraman and the commentators. It can now, all the signals of all the cameras might come into a hub, and you'll be able to do games out of a central hub, which will mean that less people have to travel. In these times, it might be a good thing, which is what Sky is, I think, planning to do for this season, for the international broadcast and for the 100. So we'll wait and watch that space. There are lots of innovations. It doesn't necessarily have to be measured in terms of, stuff like you're talking about, these helmet cameras and stuff like that. They are just basically, let's say, what, oddities. Yeah, so they just come there. You get one replay or two replays or three replays a match. They don't really, in my opinion, give you enough value for money.
I see. Now, one last question before we wrap this up. If, say, there was a cameraman who is covering cricket, or some producer or director who's been covering the game of cricket, how easy or difficult would it be for that person to make a transition to, say, a different sport? It could be probably a hockey, a football, or a basketball. How easy or difficult could that transition be for someone if they want to make it?
There is nobody in the world who just does one sport. I mean, we are not cricketers. We can't afford to survive on just one sport. So everybody does other sports. There is absolutely no issues with it. I've done hockey, I've done tennis, I've done football, I've done badminton, I've done table tennis, I've done shooting, I've done wrestling. I mean, and many others. These are just some that I can think of at the top of my head. Whitewater rafting, I mean, drone racing. So it's, it's everything. You need to think creatively, and you need to come up with solutions. So a good broadcaster is a good broadcaster, irrespective. It doesn't really matter.
Well, this was a very enjoyable and an insightful conversation, Hemant sir. I hope you enjoyed as well and thought it was worth your time. Thank you so much on coming to Gupshup with Gill, and I hope we get to see you again sometime. And that at that time we are discussing some other technology, some other issue, or some other insight into the world of broadcasting and camera work. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Gupshup. It was great fun.
So this was Hemant Buch sir, who told us about broadcasting today. If you like this show, please share it with your friends and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And stay tuned for more episodes of Gupshup with Gill. And I'd like to thank Hemant sir once again, and end this show on this great note. Thank you.